Hey there, friends. Day 4. I hope you've enjoyed Crossing Canada so far. Have you been learning anything? First of all, Canada is huge, and also it is so diverse. Diversity in our land, like you've been learning, means we have mountains, prairies, coastlines, huge lakes, and forests, and even the weather. And the people who live across Canada are also very different. One of the most wonderful things about Canada is our diversity. There is a verse in the Bible from Psalm 117, in verse 1. It says, "Praise God, everybody. Applaud God, all people. We can all be diverse, for we are all God's children." I really like this verse. We are all God's children, and we are all diverse like Canada. So, like the verse says, applaud God. So let's all definitely applaud God, all give thanks to God for making us each unique, diverse, and thanks for this great diversity in the country we live in, Canada. Our Cross Canada tour today takes us to Quebec and New Brunswick. When I say Quebec, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Francophones, right. French-speaking Quebec. We can define a person by what their main language is. In the rest of Canada, people are called Anglophones. And even though a person may speak a different language other than just English, and English is used through our businesses, it's how we communicate to each other, it's how you and I are talking right now. But in Quebec, people are called Francophones. Here's a really interesting fact that you probably don't know. New Brunswick is the only bilingual province in our country. That means half of New Brunswick speaks English and half of New Brunswick speaks French, and they call themselves Francophones and Anglophones in one province. I lived in New Brunswick for a few years, and one of the first things I found really interesting was when I would go into a restaurant or a store, I would be welcomed by "Hello, bonjour." And the way that I answered back was the way that the conversation would go on. So someone would say, "Hello, bonjour," and I would say, "Hello," and they would say, "How are you? Can I help you?" But if I had gone in and said, "Bonjour," they would have just started talking to me in French. It was the coolest thing. I never stopped being amazed by that the whole time I would live there. But it isn't just the language that makes Quebec and New Brunswick distinct and different from other parts of Canada, just like we've been learning every other day, how everything in each area has so many different things. Quebec is the largest province in Quebec, Canada. It has a very different feel and different look than all of Canada. Have you ever been to Quebec? Have any of you been to Quebec? Did you feel the difference about Quebec? It isn't that there's just a lot of French things like French signs, but there's a lot of really neat old buildings in Quebec too. In fact, many people often describe Quebec as having a very European flavor. And are there any ideas of what kind of foods are in Quebec? Poutine. Right, poutine is on the menu for today. I hope you get it. I hope you enjoy your poutine today. Now, I'm not going to try and make you hungry, but the thing about Quebec is that food is a big part of Quebec. Something that's always talked about in Quebec, it's shared, it's celebrated, it's just part of the whole thing. There are things like Montreal smoked meats and bagels. And here are some French-sounding French words. I'm not good at French, but here are some French words of French foods. There's fève au lard, which translated means beans with fat. There's the creton, which is the salty pork meat spread that Quebecers use for breakfast on their toast. There's pâté chinois, which is the Quebecois version of shepherd's pie, which mashed potatoes are loaded up on top of ground beef and onions and corn. There's the tortilla, which is a Quebec-style meat pie of ground pork or beef that's baked in a pie crust and spices and all that, and they're eaten together with ketchup. And then there's the tarte au sucre, which means sugar pie. But there's one more important fact about something that we all enjoy. Quebec is by far the largest producer of maple syrup. And that's something that's really kind of cool. I'm hoping that at some point through your travels through our Canada tour that you're going to have at least one thing where you get to put maple syrup on. And then you can say, hey, this is the biggest Canadian product there is going out there in the world. Everybody loves Canada's maple syrup. Going a little farther to New Brunswick, there are some neat things about New Brunswick. New Brunswick has the highest tides in the world. Twice a day, 160 billion tons of water flows in and out of the Bay of Fundy. You can be standing on a rock and there's no water on it, no water around it. In fact, the shoreline looks like it's miles away. It's huge, like a big beach. And as you stand there for a few hours, the water gets closer and closer and closer. And if you were able to stand on that rock or hold on to that rock, at one point, you will be actually underwater. It's really cool. And the neat part about that is it happens twice a day. That's so cool. I lived in New Brunswick, so I got to see the Bay of Fundy tides a few times, and I was fascinated both times. One of the videos today, you will see the Bay of Fundy tides, and I hope you enjoy that. Another cool thing about New Brunswick is that there are more kinds of whales in the waters of New Brunswick than anywhere else in the world. I've been whale watching in New Brunswick, and it was a really foggy day when we went whale watching that day. Our boat captain told us that there were a lot of whales around, but we couldn't see any whales. We kept wondering how he knew there were a lot of whales there. Guess what he knew the whales were there from? The smell of the whale poop. I'm sorry, but the whale poop was disgusting. It's really, really strong. So even though we didn't see the whales right away, we could sure smell them. We did see them eventually, though. I've only been focusing on the 2 of our provinces in Canada. And they're so interesting. Just 2. And we've seen other things about the other provinces so far. That's what makes the diversity of Canada just such a cool thing, really. Let's go back to that Bible verse, though, that I said, Psalm 117, verse 1. It says, praise God, everybody, applaud God, all people. We can be diverse, but we are all God's children. We are all God's children. And there is beauty and power of praise that comes with being united and being diverse. And that's the most glorious thing. God's greatest gift to each one of us is his love. And he wants each one of us to experience his love and to love others like he loves us. Doesn't matter where a person's from or anything else that's different about them. We are all God's children. So let's praise God.